Happy Sunday, sports fans, and welcome to another episode of the Buffoon Sports Talk. I'm Jake, your host for the Sunday Rundown, where we break down and analyze the matchups in the NFL for that given week. And today's October 20th, and we're in week 7 of the NFL regular season. This means that teams are really starting to heat up. They're starting to make those roster moves. They're getting more in sync with a lot of their coordinators, their coaches, a lot of the game plans and concepts that they're trying to implement. And the playoff picture is really starting to take shape right now. A lot of key, interesting matchups this week with playoff implications, more than likely. Some people going down with injuries right now, which are going to make things interesting. And a lot of teams are sitting at 2-4. So they're not completely out of this, but they really need to start winning some games right now, and specifically in the AFC. So really, really excited to kind of break down these games this week and analyze not just who we think is going to win, but some of the key matchups to watch for. So we'll go ahead and start with the first game this week, which is the 49ers versus the Redskins. So super super interesting matchup here, just because the 49ers, they're 5-0. And I don't know if they've had the hardest schedule so far. They proved last week that they were a legitimate contender by taking down the Los Angeles Rams. But another easy opponent, in my opinion, by the 49ers. So, in my opinion, they should take this game and move to 6-0. And it's always nice to get an easy opponent on the road. Because if you can take road wins and then still have some games left over at home, and in my opinion, I'd rather if I'm an NFL team, I'd rather have a lot of my more difficult games at home. Because if you can squeeze those out, it makes a lot of those road games a little bit easier. And road games are already a little bit more challenging as it is anyways, being on the road. And so if you're playing an easier team, it always helps to get some of those easy wins to lock up a better seed in your conference. So. But San Francisco, they have a really, really strong offense and a really, really solid defense. Right now they're the number 2 ranked defense in the entire NFL, only giving up 12.8 points per game to their opponents, so less than 13 points a game. And on offense, they're actually the 3rd ranked offense in the game, scoring 29.4 points per game. So they've got a huge margin of difference in terms of the point differential. And so I really think that they're a really complete team, regardless of how their schedule may have looked so far to start the season. So um, I think the 49ers are one serious wide receiver away from really being able to make a conference push in the NFC. I think this year probably still goes to the Saints or Packers, but 49ers are a young team, so be watching out for them. But as far as the Redskins go, boy, they just fired Jay Gruden. I still think they're trying to figure out their quarterback situation there between Case Keenum, Colt McCoy, and Dwayne Haskins. Dwayne just doesn't have enough experience to go out there and start playing right away. And I think that if they were to throw him out there and throw him into the fire, it would it would do worse things for his career than beneficial things, because that team around him, it's very similar to the team that Josh Rosen has had around him. It's just it's a dumpster fire, and I think that you will ruin Dwayne Haskins' potential career if you throw him out there right now. So I agree with the idea of using some of your more veteran quarterbacks like Case Keenum and like Colt McCoy. But boy, it's got to be hard to be a Redskins fan right now, because you don't see all you're seeing is a team that can only seem to manage to win games against a team like the Miami Dolphins. But there's really no hope here in the near future, because you're not seeing things that you like right now. Whereas, Giants fans, Cardinal fans, they're seeing things that they like in Kyler Murray and Daniel Jones, which we'll get to in just a minute because I'm excited for that matchup. But just got to be a tough time to be a Redskins fan. But we'll go ahead and move on. So the next matchup, and probably the one that I'm the most excited for, is the Cardinals and the Giants. So the Cardinals are visiting New York this week, and most importantly, we've got a matchup between Kyler Murray, the number 1 overall pick, and Daniel Jones, who was the 2nd quarterback taken in the draft. And so these two names will always be linked together, just considering they're both quarterbacks drafted in the first round. Um, and I'm excited to watch this matchup. The same way that I always like watching Carson Wentz and Jared Goff and Dak Prescott and that whole trio matchup. Um, you know, these two quarterbacks are always going to be linked together. And I just got to say, there's been a lot of talk this week around around Fox Sports and ESPN, and in terms of which quarterback you'd rather have. And This podcast that we've started, it's still fairly new. We're trying to get it up and running off the ground. But one of the things that really, really gives me hope that this podcast is going to be successful and that we're going to really make this big is that you got these bozos on ESPN, talking like a bunch of clowns who have no clue what they're talking about. And it either it gives me hope because the statements that they were making this week indicate that they either have no idea what they're watching if they're watching the games, or they're covering a topic that they haven't watched anything about at all. So either way, that's not a good sign. But these clowns were ragging on Kyler Murray and talking up Daniel Jones, and I think Daniel Jones is a great quarterback. So I'm not going to dog on him at all. But boy, if you think right now through 6, 7 weeks of the NFL that Daniel Jones is the better quarterback than Kyler Murray, you're just not watching the film. I don't know what else to say. You're just not watching the film, and you're not taking into consideration the dumpster fire that the Arizona Cardinals were last season, and all the changes that they've had. New coaches, new staff, new everything. So Kyler Murray has got zip on that ball. He's got finesse with the ball. He's got some of the fastest feet you can imagine. Um, and he's a throw first quarterback. I mean, and he's not one of these scrambling quarterbacks that looks to run first and they make their first or second read and then they take off with the football. Kyler Murray goes through all four of his, I mean, depending on the play, he'll go through all three, four, or even five given, progressions before he decides that, okay, I'm progression number 6 and I'm going to take off with the football and run. So but I think people are just underestimating like what he's doing right now. Right now he's ninth in the entire NFL for passing yards as a rookie. He's ninth for passing yards. I mean, if you think about the names that are ahead of him: Patrick Mahomes, Matt Ryan, Dak Prescott, Philip Rivers, Jameis Winston, Tom Brady, Jared Goff, Russell Wilson. I mean, you take Jameis Winston off that list, I'm pretty happy with every one of these quarterbacks. I mean, you can knock on Goff or Dak Prescott a little bit, but this is a good list to be a part of. So, um, I'm happy with Kyler Murray right now. He's completing 64% of his passes. 7 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. I'd like to see a little bit more in the red zone, but outside of that, I mean, I'm really, really, really happy with Kyler Murray. And I've got the Cardinals winning this game. Um, this is going to be a tough one. I think both defenses are a little suspect. I think both run games could be explosive today. I mean, Saquon Barkley is supposed to be back. The Cardinals have given up a lot of yards and points to tight ends, so Evan Ingram will be another key name to look out for here. But I think for the Cardinals, I think they're continuing to come with a different scheme that's hard for defenses to plan for because you just don't know what you're going to see from week to week. They're lining up 4 wide receivers on a very consistent basis. The 10 personnel offense. So that's tough for teams to play against because you've got to put 5, even sometimes 6 defensive backs out there on the field, which means if you're not really deep in your secondary, the Cardinals could expose you big time there. So yeah, excited for that game. Personally, really rooting for the Cardinals as I'm an Arizona native here, second favorite team. So we will now move on to the Raiders and the Packers. This is another really, really exciting game because, the Packers, really, really solid defense, giving up less than 20 points a game. You've got the Raiders, who their defense has been a little suspect. Their front seven seems to be able to get some pressure on quarterbacks, and they do a decent job of stopping the run. But they're still giving up, almost 25 points a game. And I think even though Aaron Rodgers and that offense a little beat up right now, you got Devontae Adams out, you got Geronimo Allison, who's more than likely going to be out. You've got Scalding, who's their third receiver, who's a little banged up. I know he's questionable for today. So they're kind of depleted at the wide receiver position for Green Bay. So I do believe that will kind of help the Raiders secondary a little bit. But on the other side of the ball, you've got, a Raiders wide receiving corps that they're without Tyrell Williams today. They already lost Antonio Brown before the season started, who they were really banking on to be a really strong receiver for their team. So I really think they're going to have to go more of the ball control, run the football through Josh Jacobs, really, really try to hit their tight end and Waller and hit some of their running backs like Washington and Richard, and just kind of kind of go from there. I think they need to be hesitant taking deep shots or even 15 to 20 yard intermediate shots through the field today. Be really really scary for Derek Carr to have to throw downfield. And as far as their offense goes, the Raiders are averaging around 20 points a game on offense. Packers are averaging around 24 points per game on offense. So to me, I think the Packers, they're playing at home. They've got a little bit better defense, a little bit better offense, and I'm going to take Aaron Rodgers over Derek Carr, even though I'm really really high on Derek Carr. I think he's extremely underrated, I should say. So next matchup, we've got the Vikings and the Lions, another super exciting matchup, and one that's really got some playoff implications at stake. And actually, real quick for the Raiders, big game here. If they win this game, they move to 4-2 with Patrick Mahomes being out. And you just look at the Chiefs' schedule, and they've got the Packers, the Vikings, the Titans, and the Chargers coming up as their next 4 games. So this is a big game for the Raiders. If they manage to squeeze this one out and move to 4-2, the Raiders could actually make a push for winning that division, not just locking down a wild card spot, but winning that division. So that would be huge. So sorry. Now we'll move on to the Vikings and the Lions. And another interesting, exciting game here. Both teams I think have impressed or surprised people, I should say, this year. I think people have been pretty low on the Vikings and Kirk Cousins after what they saw last season. Um, and I think the Lions too. I think everyone's just always counting them out, but they're pretty consistent. And Matt Stafford's a really good quarterback, so you get him some pieces around him, and they're always going to be solid. But you look at you look at that Vikings offense, and they've got the ability to be explosive. They're averaging 25 points a game. Uh, the running game is really strong, and they run it through Dalvin Cook, which I think it really that's what's going to determine this game, in my opinion. Is the Lions have got a really strong defense, good secondary, so it's going to be hard to throw on them. So this means that you're going to the only way that you're going to be able to beat the Lions is you're going to have to run the ball on them first and open up that running game so that Kirk Cousins can start to take more play action shots, and through those play action shots, that'll help him get more targets to Diggs and Thielen and really be able to spread the ball. But if they struggle running the ball today, it's going to be really tough for them to beat that Lions defense, because that Lions defense, I mean, they're top 5, top 10 defense in the league. Maybe not always statistically, but when it comes to at least their secondary, I would definitely say their secondary is a top 10 defense in the league. They're seeming to give up a lot of points, but when when you're looking at the yards per game, let's just take a look at what are they giving up here, yards per game in the secondary. Uh, Yeah, so I mean, I guess they've been a little suspect. I would say that the yards per game probably is not the best indicator here, because they're giving up 280 yards per game. But Darius Slay, they got some names in the secondary, and that's where Patricia's specialty is. Um, so you know what? Actually, I kind of take that back. I could actually see the Vikings. Yesterday on our Buffoon Sports Talk podcast, I predicted that the Lions were going to win this game, and actually, after thinking about it just a little bit more here, recording this one, I think I'm going to change my pick to the Vikings. Yep, I'm doing a switch here live. I'm switching to the Vikings. I think the Vikings take this game today, um, and I think Kirk Cousins shows everybody that he is a good quarterback, not a great or elite quarterback, but that he's good enough to take your team deep into the playoffs. So that defense is underrated, and I think they will manage to run the ball, and I think after that, after looking a little bit deeper into that Lions defense, I actually think they are a little suspect. Um, they've been giving up some big plays. So, yeah, I've actually changed to the Vikings. Little course correction mid podcast here, throwing everyone for a loop. But this just goes to show you we do it live. We don't I don't try to plan out what I'm going to say. Really, I just like to get right in and get after it. So, next is Jaguars and Bengals. So this to me is really going to be a crap fest. Um, I think the Bengals and the Dolphins are both tanking pretty bad right now. I mean, they're hopefully trying to get Tua. Both teams, I think, are in need of a franchise quarterback. Andy Dalton is clearly not the answer. but could they take their first game today? They're at home. They play the 2-4 Jaguars. Gardner Minshew, as any rookie does, is going to have some good games, and he's also going to have some other games where he makes some big mistakes, and that could be this week. I just don't know what else the Bengals have. I mean, they got Joe Mixon, but they really don't have anything really else to move the ball. No one to really stop the ball or make a play on defense. It's just this is ugly. It's an ugly season to be a Bengals fan. Um, I'm gonna go with the Jaguars on this one. It's gonna be close. I think. The Bengals have a shot at winning their first game, but yeah, I got to go with the Jaguars on this. I think they've just got a little bit of a better defense, um, and yeah, they got their quarterback. So moving on to the Dolphins and the Bills. So, again, I'm not as high on the Bills as everybody else is. I think they're 4-1, but I think their record looks a little better than the team actually is. I think they've had a fairly soft schedule to start the season outside of that one loss to New England, and I think this game against the Dolphins is another one. Um, Regardless, I mean, the Bills are looking like they're in a good spot to secure a playoff spot just because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how hard the schedule is that you played. It just matters if you won games, and they're winning games. So they've won 6 of their last 7 home games against the Dolphins. And I don't think the Dolphins are going to take the game from them. Ryan Fitzpatrick's starting again today. Josh Rosen was starting last week. And so I think they still need to determine who they want to lead that franchise moving forward. I don't think it's been very clear what their belief is in Josh Rosen and the mixed signals that they're sending. Because if at first you might think that they believe in him because they're putting him out there, and then they pull him back out, and that tells me one of two things. I mean, if you truly do believe that Josh Rosen is the guy moving forward, you probably wouldn't want to just let him get torched and just destroyed in his first 2 seasons and uh, potentially turn him into another David Carr situation, like on the Texans. But man, uh, pulling him again right now, you gotta just wonder where his head's at, where his confidence level's at. And well, if I'm Josh Rosen, I'm hoping that the Dolphins go like 1-15 or 0-16, draft Tua, and just cut him loose. Like I wish. I mean, I like Josh Rosen. I feel bad for him. I think he's gotten served a pretty unfortunate hand here. But I would like to see him be able to pick where he goes. I'd like for him to be able to go sign with another team without getting traded. Because if he gets traded from Miami, he's going to be traded just to another dumpster fire team, probably like the Bengals, like the Redskins, some other team that's really just trying to figure out what they got going at the quarterback position. And I just don't think that'll be a recipe for success for him, and it'll be unfortunate if he just got dealt a bad hand, and that hurts his NFL career. So next we've got a big game. This is the Rams and the Falcons. The reason that this is a big game, in my opinion, is the Rams are 3-3. We all know they just made a bunch of big moves to acquire Jalen Ramsey, trade Marcus Peters, trade away a bunch of future draft picks. And to me, that seemed like an all-in move by the Rams. And so this game is really important. You're going up against the Falcons, who are 1-5. So you really need to win this game on paper, right? Because you can't just you can't be losing multiple games in a row like this if you're the Rams, especially when the division is clearly stepping up this season. You got the 49ers that are undefeated. You got the Seahawks that are doing amazing, and Russell Wilson looks like an MVP candidate. They've already beaten you, and you're the reigning NFC representatives. So you can't lose another game like this. And the Falcons have actually won 4 straight games against the Rams, and they're almost due for a win. I mean, this Falcons team on paper is talented, especially that offense. Especially that offense. You look at the weapons: Julio Jones, Sanu. You're looking at Hooper, Matt Ryan, Devontae Freeman, Calvin Ridley. I mean, they've got the weapons, and right now that Rams defense, we got Jalen Ramsey's first game in this new system under Wade Phillips. Aqib Talib is out, Clay Matthews is out. This is gonna put a lot of pressure on Jared Goff again, and Brandon Cooks and Todd Gurley, and you've got so much money like inked up into those 3 contracts. If you're the Rams, you really need your offense to perform today and put some points on the board against this soft Falcons defense. Because boy, if you don't, this is gonna get ugly. You got to be able to put up points against the Falcons, and you can't lose against them today if you're the Rams. So a lot of, I wouldn't say necessarily a big game, a big pressure game though, for sure for the Rams. So I do have them winning this game. I'm excited to see the matchup between Jalen Ramsey and Julio Jones. I don't personally think Jalen Ramsey is the best corner in the league. I think I've got him probably around 3 or 4, and I think that Julio Jones will expose why that is today. You watch someone like Patrick Peterson cover Julio Jones or Stephon Gilmore cover him, you'll notice that they do a much better job of locking him down than what you'll see Jalen Ramsey do, in my opinion. So excited to call that. So yeah, we'll move on to the next game with Chargers versus the Titans, and this is another big game. Both these teams are in the AFC. Both are 2-4. If you recall, the Titans last year had a legit chance to be able to try to go in the playoffs and make a run, but they played the Colts Week 17 without Marcus Mariota. Um, and then the Chargers obviously made the playoffs last year. So these are two teams whose fan bases I think are expecting a little bit of them this year. Certainly not a losing record. Um, and both of them are at 2-4 and have underperformed big time. And I just see it as whichever team loses this game essentially can write themselves out of going to the playoffs. Um, Titans decided to change quarterbacks and go with Ryan Tannehill as opposed to Marcus Mariota. So that tells me a lot right there. If the Dolphins are willing to move on from Ryan Tannehill and and Marcus Mariota is not pulling his weight in his 5th season now, uh, you know, I think the Titans are one of those teams like we were just talking about a potential landing spot for Josh Rosen. Uh, I think the Titans could be one of those teams here, so they need to figure something out. But Chargers, same exact thing. Philip Rivers getting a little bit older. Philip Rivers has always had an awkward release or throwing motion where it looks like he's shot putting, like he's on a track team, because that's kind of how he learned to throw the football, and he actually was a shot putter. But I think as you get older and a lot of your just raw strength goes away, and at the same time, while your O line is suspect, getting beat up, he doesn't have very much time to sit there and actually plant his foot in the ground before he delivers his throw. And so I think that that's presenting a lot of challenges for Philip Rivers right now. And you know, um, it's unfortunate because I think this might be just this year where we start to see the old era of quarterbacking really start to dissipate. But between Peyton Manning retiring a few years ago, Drew Brees going down with injury, Big Ben going down with injury, Eli Manning having to pass the torch over to Daniel Jones. Tom Brady is looking somewhat normal this year. Um, as far as some of the throws he's making, they're still putting up the points. They're still winning games. But if you're actually watching the throws, he's missing some throws. He's looking like he's 42. So this might be the year that we really start to see that old model of quarterbacking go away, and you really start to see the new, what I would call the shortstop quarterback. The quarterback that is basically like a baseball player playing shortstop back there, who just scrambles around for a minute and makes his throws. That's Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, Patrick Mahomes, some of these other quarterbacks. So, but yeah, personally, I've got the Chargers in this one. This is a tough one for me to call because they've really been blowing it lately, and I do think the Titans have got a good defense or an okay defense. I think they've looked worse than they are just because that offense hasn't been able to generate anything for them and keep them off the field very long. But uh, you know, I think they're gonna have to really run the ball through Derrick Henry today. But I got Chargers. This one barely. I think it's gonna be an ugly game personally. Um, the next game, that's one of our 1 o'clock games, or one of our 4 o'clock Eastern games, but for us Arizona folk, it's 1 o'clock. And our second 4 o'clock game this afternoon is we've got the Ravens and the Seahawks. This is gonna be a really really good matchup. Another battle of the birds. Two great quarterbacks that are mobile, explosive on their feet, um, solid defenses, and most importantly, this is Earl Thomas's return to Seattle. And I really just want to call it. I got the Seahawks winning this game. I do think Russell Wilson throws his first interception, and I'm going to go ahead and call it. I think it'd be cool if he threw it to Earl Thomas, and I think Earl Thomas really wants to pick him. I think he'd love to be able to say he was the first one to force Russell Wilson to throw a pick this season, and especially to do it in front of the former home crowd for Earl. I think I think that's weighing on his mind. So I'm gonna call that. But I do have the Seahawks winning this game. Um, and I actually think that Lamar Jackson is going to be exposed a little bit in this game too. I think he's been exposed a couple of times this season. Um, Not for long periods of time. It's really been for brief, like what I would call quarters. But boy, they were talking at the beginning of the season like he's fixed all of his throwing mechanics and everything. He's still overthrowing receivers. He's still staring down his guys. He's still not looking off his targets as often as he should. He's not getting to his third and fourth progression before he scrambles with the football. I mean, I'm seeing some things from Lamar that make me question a lot of that hype that we had through 2 to 3 weeks into this new season. So, um, next up we've got the Saints and the Bears. So, this is another tough game to call. You've got Teddy Bridgewater starting in place of Drew Brees. You're in Chicago, which is a tough place to start. At some point, you're gonna stop winning games on the road if you're the Saints. I mean, they're due for another loss. Um, they're playing a tough defense. You got Will Fuller, that secondary. You got Khalil Mack, obviously. You got Danny Trevathan. I mean, there's some really really big players on the Bears that I could really see giving the Saints some fits. Um, at the same time, I like that Saints offense a little bit better. I think that they can move the ball better through Kamara than the Bears can through David Montgomery right now. And I do think that this will be a game of having to establish the run. Uh, you've got Mitch Trubisky back, so I mean, we'll see how he does. I mean, the first couple weeks he didn't look like he was really taking ownership of that Matt Nagy offense like you would have wanted to see him do and really make that step up. Um, but yeah, so I personally have got the Saints in this one. I think their defense is better. I think they're going to force Mitch Trubisky to throw just a little bit too often, and I think with Lattimore in the secondary and things like that, they will end up getting them. I mean, they're holding their opponents to about 20 points a game. And if you just kind of look at that Bears offense, they're kind of weak down there. They're at the bottom of the pack as far as offensive production. So I think they're in the bottom 10 for sure, but I think they're averaging less than 20. Let me see for sure. Yeah, they're averaging is 17 and a half points per game. Um, so they're in the bottom 10 down there for sure. They're the bottom 7 team actually. So on offense, so hopefully getting Mitch Trubisky back will help change that. But I don't see it happening for him this week. I got the Saints. Next, another really exciting matchup and one that has huge playoff implications at stake: Eagles versus Cowboys. Hmm. I always love this matchup because you got Dak Prescott and Carson Wentz. So you got two quarterbacks from the same draft class, and I think I've always just looked forward to watching two quarterbacks. I don't know if it's because I grew up in the Peyton and Brady era, even though they're not from the same draft class, just the quarterback rivals. And when you look back at history with Dan Marino and John Elway coming out of the same draft class, I think it's just interesting to always see quarterbacks come from the same class or same time period that are really competing, and especially if they're in the same division. So I'm gonna enjoy watching this. They're playing in Dallas, and yesterday on the Buffoon Sports Talk with all four of the buffoons, we always do our predictions, and I predicted the Eagles, and really after sleeping on that and thinking about it a little bit more, I still am gonna go Eagles, but I think it's only because you look at Amari Cooper and Randall Cobb, they're a little banged up right now. Um, So I think it's going to put a little bit more pressure on Dak Prescott. I think the Eagles have got a really really solid defensive line, so I think they're gonna force the Cowboys O line to struggle a little bit more than they normally would and cause Zeke to not have as easy a time running up the A and B gaps as he'd like. So I do have the Eagles in this game. They've got a pretty solid defense overall, just like the Cowboys do. So I think this will be a close matchup, both in terms of offensive and defensive production. I could see I personally think the ultimate decision maker in regards to who wins this game is going to come down to which team turns the ball over more. So, and I think that will be the Cowboys. I think Dak Prescott. Three. I mean that loss against the Jets, boy, that's a big loss. Hard not to carry that one with you. He's thrown a lot of picks recently, so might be. I personally think Dak's letting a lot of the outside noise get inside his head. You know, the conversations of you're not worth this much money or whatever, you're not that franchise quarterback or whatever the conversation might be about his contract coming up. I think he might be letting that noise get to him here or letting the pressure get to him. So, but right now, Jerry Jones looks like a genius for not signing him. Uh, so you look at other decisions that the Rams have made and other teams like that have inked up their quarterbacks and are finding themselves now without money to spend for the next few years. And you know, if you're the Cowboys, you got to pay Dak. I mean, you've got to. It's unfortunate, even if he's not worth that, but you got to pay Dak. Um, he's taken you to playoff games. He's won playoff games, and even though I think Tony Romo was a better quarterback in terms of his skills, uh, Tony wasn't getting it done in the big games, and Dak's done that, or in a lot of big games, I should say. Dak's done that, so um, you got to pay him, unfortunately, but maybe not as much as you would have before the season started. And finally, tomorrow night we got Monday Night Football. We got the Patriots versus the Jets. Even though Sam Darnold's back, I think this is a pretty easy one to predict. The Patriots, they've got the best offense in the league right now. They've got the best defense in the league right now. They've got a track record of success. You can't argue with it. They've got the largest. They literally do have the number one ranked offense at the averaging 31 points per game, almost 32 points per game, and they've got the best defense in the league. They're only giving up 8 points per game on defense. So, granted, they've played a little weak, some soft defenses in my opinion, but I think this Jets team is another one. And I think it's going to continue to pad those stats. So yeah, those are the matchups for the week. Pretty excited personally for all these games. Oh, sorry, we forgot my favorite one because I decided to save the best for last, and that is the Houston Texans versus the Indianapolis Colts. I'm a Colts fan. This is a battle for the AFC South. Colts are 3-2. Texans are 4-2. Both coming off big wins against the Chiefs. Um, I'm gonna go with the Colts on this one. They're my favorite team, so I always hate going against them. I've only seen them get outplayed once this season because I personally thought they outplayed the Chargers. Um, the only team I think been outplayed by was the Raiders. And in their defense, they were really banged up that game, missing Darius Leonard, T.Y. Hilton, Malik Hooker, Clayton Gathers. So it's going to be tough, but I do think that I think the Colts pull this one out. I think Frank Reich is a really really good play caller. I think they're safe with the football. I think they run the football well. At the same time, they don't stop the run well, and the Houston Texans have been running the ball well recently through Carlos Hyde and Duke Johnson. So I think this will be a really interesting running matchup. I think the Texans have the better quarterback at Deshaun Watson. Um, but I've got the Colts because they're playing in Indy. If they were playing in Houston, I'd personally have Houston. But I've got Indy. Um, and Indy's coming off a bye week, so they've been able to get a little bit healthier. They got some big names coming back like Darius Leonard. Um, and I think anytime you give a team that much time to prepare for one other team, I mean, you think about it after the Colts beat the Chiefs, the Colts were focused right then and there on coming up with game plans to beat the Texans, whereas the Texans they were already focused on their following week matchup against the Chiefs. So, I think when you give a team that long to prepare for someone, it gives you a little bit of an edge. So, hopefully they can squeeze this one out and take prime control of that AFC South division as we go into some of their easier matchups about halfway through the season. So yeah, I hope you all found this entertaining and resourceful this morning. As always, if you found the content today, exciting or pleasurable to listen to, really recommend checking us out on all of our social media pages. We're the Buffoon Sports Talk. Check us out. We're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Check us out on Spotify, and tell your friends about it too. That's really we're just trying to grow. We're four buddies. We love sports. Each of us have a different niche in regards to sports that I think we love. Mine's football, as you can see. But we just love sharing sports and our opinions. There's a bunch of clowns on TV right now and on the news or on the radio or on podcasts right now that are talking sports that don't have any clue what they're talking about, and I think they're less passionate, do less research, and spend less time really focusing on what's going on. And so we feel, if there's such a huge marketplace for it right now, that why wouldn't we want to jump in and get involved in this? So if you guys enjoyed this content for today, please give us a like, give us a follow, tell your friends about it, have them listen, because we could really use your support. So thanks everybody. Enjoy the games for this week, and we will catch you next week on another episode of the Sunday Rundown. Peace.